Okay, oh, mute. Moment. Okay, first of all, today's learning of Mesilat Yesharim, Lili Nishmat Avigdor Chai Avram ben Rachel Leah and Meir Tzvi, as always. And in addition, today we are also learning the Lili Nishmat Michael ben Avraham, Mike Abrams, Zichrono Livracha. I will come to that in a few minutes after we start the beginning of Mesilat Yesharim, and I veer into an additional topic in a little while. I'll talk a little bit about why this new topic we're going to deal with just today, and also want to thank Hannah and family for bringing treats and drinks. Nishmato is kibud kal. For those of you who are on Zoom, it's your loss. You can still pop over. It's not too late. We might be able to squeeze you in. Okay, so we're going to come to the second topic in a little while. The first topic I want to do, and you'll see why else it actually meshes very well. We're going to begin the next chapter, the Mesilat Yesharim, which in the small booklet it's on page 104, and the topic is Be'ur Chelkei Chasidut. Just as a reminder, what's really going on here? The second half of this book, I think it bears repeating, that deals with a lot of subjects of self-improvement and goals in life that on one hand seem to be absolutely unattainable. On the other hand, we also discussed that even at certain points, it could be for an hour, it could be for 2 days, it could be for a month, something that may not be sustainable. The person can make changes that can reach certain levels of tremendous growth. But then we said that this particular chapter, the one before it, which is the introduction to Chasidut, meaning piety, which is not a great explanation of the word, but that's what we use, that this is one that is probably most attainable of this in the second half of the book. And Ramchal, Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, the author of the book, gave us a basic idea of what is Chasidut. First, he tells us what it's not, which it doesn't mean going into freezing cold mikvahs and having to have certain clothing, and it doesn't mean to have all these live in poverty. You know, that's not what it's about. But what is it about? The bottom line being to take every mitzvah, every positive commandment, and to do it to the nth degree, to do it as great and as possible, the most beautiful way, the most expanded way, the most honorific way. And you'll see why this will also help us in the second half of today's class in a little bit. What I want to do is to take a look at the beginning of chapter 19, spend a few minutes on that. Just hit the wrong button on my computer. Okay. Perek Yutet, which again, page 104 in the small book, chapter 19. There are three main divisions or branches, so to speak, of what does it mean? How does Chasidut manifest itself? Now, I know I've said this at least 3 or 4 million times, and it's not an exaggeration because I never ever exaggerate. Maybe it's 6 million times, I don't know. Is Chasidut, put out of your mind what your preconceived notion of when I say the word Chasid or Chasidut. It's not, someone with payas in a black hat and has a rebbe. That's not what it is, and not in these terms. Someone asked me, I think last week, maybe Mark had asked me, when did the word Chasid first become used, like in this context that we use it? It was you, okay. And my guess is that it's probably around the time of the Baal Shem Tov, because the whole concept of Chasidut, the modern Chasidut, starting in the 1700s, was that you had a rebbe, and you were a Chasid. You had what's called the Chatzar HaRebbe, which is literally is the courtyard, but he would not really hold court, but in a sense. And those were the followers of the Rebbe called their Hasidim. So my guess is that the terminology really only began then. But the concept of Hasidut predates that.
But they call themselves that because they perceive themselves as being very pious. Is that
not necessarily to be a Hasid of the Rebbe? But that's where I believe it's a follower, right? Uh-huh. There's a fancy word for that. Acolyte. Very good. Whoa, I'll take acolytes for 50. ACOLYTE. Yeah, right. As opposed to the heavy ones. There's an heavy and an acolyte. Sorry, never mind. Bad dad joke. Sorry. Glad most people didn't hear it, but it's on tape, so you can always play the tape. Okay, anyways, let's start again here. There are three main areas of Hasidut where it manifests itself. Harishon, the Maaseh. The first one is in action. Hasheni, the Ofen Asiyah. The second one is in how the action is taken. Hashlishi Kavana. This third way is in the intention when the action is taken. Now, just to give a very, very brief concept of what these are, because he's going to spend some time, we won't get to it all today. There's, let's say, putting on tefillin. Okay, I can put on tefillin and not have any intention. I did the mitzvah, right? I did the actual mitzvah. Or, and that's like the most basic. Or I did the mitzvah and I made sure that before I did it, that the shel rosh is perfectly square and it's black and it meets all the standards. Or I can go to the, put it on and have the right intentions and everything else. That's a very, very surface way of explaining this. He'll do a little bit better idea here. Let's take a look. The first section of action, that subdivides into two more categories. The first one, actions break down into two areas. One of those things that have to do between man and his fellow man, and the other between man and God. Now, this is over the last many years of whoever learns with me for various topics and subjects will know this is a very hot button issue for me and very sore spot, which is and we've talked about already in the Mesilat Yesharim, of how people relate to God on one hand, and how people relate to their fellow man on another. It's tragic, the way that people treat each other, and yet will turn around and be the biggest shucklers in shul and the big tzedakah givers and have their names on things. It's tragic. And it's very important to understand that one cannot be considered a tzaddik or a chassid or a pious individual if their entire relationship to Judaism is just between them and God. That sounds ridiculous. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying if my relationship with God and my growth is only ben adam lamakom, then I'm only 50% there, right? Because we know that, for example, derech eretz kodma leTorah, just respect of another person, giving someone the derech eretz comes even before Torah. We're going to see what that means in the text eventually. Well, let's take a look now what he says. The first subcategory, the first category, are those actions that one takes between man and God. No, and its issue is to do the mitzvah with all the little details as best as a person can. There's a way to do a mitzvah, and there's a really good way to do the mitzvah. You all know the expression because we see in kashrut certificates, mahadrin mina mahadrin. Okay, first of all, many people don't even know where the expression comes from. Okay, we're actually coming up to the time of year, we're in Cheshvan, but we're going to come up soon to Kislev. We're going to come up to Hanukkah. And the expression comes from the halachot of Hanukkah. The Gemara Masechet Shabbat discusses, how is the mitzvah of Ner Hanukkah performed? Answer, light a candle. Third night, fifth night, sixth night, first night, doesn't make a difference. Light a candle. When you do that, you've done the mitzvah. Mahadrin, that each person in the household lights a candle. Mahadrin min mahadrin, the best of the best is you light one the first night, two the second night, three the third night, etc. So the expression mahadrin min ha-mehadrin comes from halachot of Hanukkah. It doesn't come from halachot of kashrut. It doesn't come from halachot of anything else. This basic idea comes from the halachot of Hanukkah, which is its own topic. And why of all the places is that the one where it's mentioned? I'm sure it's a great idea to talk about, but maybe we'll talk about Hanukkah time, Bezrat Hashem. So there's already an acknowledgement within the framework of halakha that there's the minimum, there's the basic, and then there's the supercharged, right? Supersized. So the idea here he's saying is that when you do the mitzvah, you always want to try and strive the best way that's within your means to be able to do it. These are the things that the Chachamim called the shiur mitzvah. Then they said in Masechet Sukkah in the Gemara, shiur mitzvah me'akvim et hapuranut. That when you go above and beyond, when you do the best, it's not even above and beyond, but to do the best that you can, it delays any bad thing happening. Now, I'm going to explain to you what that means. Oh, you gave me a nice look there. Wow. What does that even mean? It delays bad things happen. So the example I heard was as follows. Let's say that a person has a field of wheat. Let's hit something wrong here again. Person has a field of wheat. And the gzera was there's going to be a massive windstorm, and it's early on in the growth of the wheat, and that wind is really going to be dangerous for it and maybe harm it, maybe destroy it. By people doing certain mitzvot the best way possible, that the wind is still going to come, but now it's delayed. It comes a month later, same wind, but a month later. So now it's not going to harm that crop. So in a sense, now we don't do mitzvot to prevent puranut, to prevent bad things. We don't do mitzvot to get a reward. We don't do mitzvot. We do mitzvot because we're supposed to do mitzvot, because that's the bottom line. It's because I said so, right? Because Hashem tells us to do a mitzvah. It's like when someone asks me, and I've had this question, I'm sure you've had it over the years, why did you make Aliyah? Best response is, because I'm Jewish. Bottom line, this is our home. But obviously it's a much deeper answer. So the one thing is that you have to do the mitzvah the best way possible. Even though by doing the minimum of the mitzvah, with no intention, just you did it, you've already done your mitzvah. That's the general populace. That's how people approach mitzvot. But a person who wants to strive to be a chassid should not just get by and subsist with the bare minimum, but to try to do as best as possible within that mitzvah. I gave an example yesterday. I was teaching a couple of kids, and I gave the following example in a similar area. It's called hidur mitzvah. What's hidur mitzvah? It means to beautify a mitzvah. And I gave them the following example. Usually it talks in halacha about having a beautiful etog, a beautiful sukkah, a beautiful chanukah, those kind of things. I said, let's say it's going to be your birthday tomorrow, and I buy you a birthday present. Now, I have two options in delivering you the birthday present. I take a bag from Mickey's Makolet, and I drop it in there, and I like twist tie it, and I give it to you. Or I take the exact same gift, and I put it in a nice little box and a little bow with a card. Which would you want me to give you? Both girls, I was teaching two kids at once, which I don't usually do. They both said, well, obviously the one in the gift box. I said, why? It's the same gift. What is the point? We know that it also, if I were to offer you a brand new, what are they on iPhone, 30 or 20 or 11? I don't know what number they're at. What number it is. Let's say it's 11. I have no idea. So I offer you a choice. Here's literally out of the box, brand new iPhone. One has a scratch and one is perfectly clean. Which one would you take? Most people would take the one that doesn't have the scratch, even though it's identical to each other. Okay, so when it comes to how we do a mitzvah, it's why would we want, and this is the thesis here, to shortchange Hashem in the way we do the mitzvah. We should want to try to do the best if we were striving for chassidut. Now, again, I go back to what I said at the beginning. This is not out of the realm of possibility for a person. I heard an amazing shiur one time called My Special Mitzvah. My Special Mitzvah, the speaker was talking about how it's almost impossible for the average person, and he says it in the book here too, to really do every mitzvah the best way possible all the time. It's almost impossible. Doesn't exempt you from trying, though, in certain things, but what would be amazing is when a person takes a mitzvah that they somehow connect to special way, and they say, you know what, I'm going to try at least this mitzvah. Sorry, I just get distracted by screen popped up something here. I'm going to try my best to do this mitzvah the best way possible. They may take one like shiloh hakan, like sending away the mother bird. Okay, it doesn't happen that often, if ever. You haven't really come across the opportunity to shoo away a mother bird and take the eggs. But that one I'm gonna do the best way possible. Okay, or more practically, person can say, Hafreshat Chala, Birkat HaMazon. So I'm gonna really focus. I'm gonna learn all the halachot. I'm gonna do this mitzvah the best way I can. Over time, if you think about it for yourself, you will find that there's certain mitzvot you connect to more than others, and that you kind of have this pull towards, like, I want to try a little bit better. So that's a mitzvah really to start to work on. And for that moment, when you're doing that mitzvah the best way possible, you are a chassid. You are achieving what it says here in Mesilat Yesharim for chassidut. That's the first section. the first subcategory. Hachelek hasheni shel rishon, the second category of this first. B'ma sheben adam l'chavero, when it comes to how we deal with each other. V'inyano, and its issue of that what it means. Godel ha'hatava she'adam le'olam meitiv la'biriyot v'lo meira lahem. Always being in a position to do good for others and never causing harm to the other. V'zeh b'guf, b'mamon, u'v'nefesh. That's three ways that you could potentially help someone or harm someone. Physically, financially, spiritually, emotionally. That's one. A person could be very nice to another person and just they get along and they do, but they cheat them or swindle them out of a little bit of money. Or they borrow money and don't pay it back. Or they're very nice. They never would think to steal from someone. They call them names or they make fun of them or publicly embarrass the individual. There are all kinds of ways that we find to hurt somebody. Sometimes it's a look. Sometimes it's a lack of a phone call. Just because someone is, God forbid, sick doesn't mean everyone in the city is going to call them and find out how they're doing. But if you consider yourself a close friend, pick up the phone and call. Send a message if you can't call. And because sometimes a lack of something hurts. And this part of what he doesn't say this here, but it is in Tanya and in Orchot Tzadikim and in almost every other sefer that I've learned that has to do with spiritual growth. It also has to do with awareness. Being aware of the other person. This awareness that someone might need you. He is actually going to talk about it in this next paragraph. But it's more of becoming, I heard a speaker, it wasn't a shiur, it was a woman speaking, I'm trying to remember where it was. Oh, she was speaking to some conference I had gone to, and she said she had been sitting at a table at a restaurant. And the person at the table immediately next to her, they're not a big restaurant, a small restaurant, was reaching for a napkin. And she saw there were no napkins on the table. And without even thinking, she just reached over and gave her a napkin from her table. She said, wow, how did you even know I needed a napkin? Why would you? She says, well, I happened to notice. I observed people and I saw the direction you were going and your hands were dirty. I figured it's like this awareness of what someone else might need before they don't realize they don't have it. That is a tremendous boost, not just for helping the other person, but that's also raising your level of chassidut. Look what it says now in the next paragraph, and I have a nice little comment on it too, I hope. Baguf, how does it that physically we help somebody? To be able to help anybody as much as you can, with what they can, and to lighten their load from them. Is what it says in Pirkei Avot, among many of the things that we strive for in this world is to help the other person carry their burden with them. I'm going to read the next line and then we'll come back to that. And if something happens physically to another person, and you can prevent it, you can make it easier, you can help that person, you should really make it your business. You should work on helping that other person. What does that mean? Literally means to carry the burden with your friend. This is going to sound like it is. It's going to sound like it's a Dvar Torah for Shabbat Brachot, and you can feel free to use it, but it fits here perfectly. The last two of the Shabbat Brachot end with Baruch Atah Hashem Mesamech Chatan V'Chala, that Hashem should bring joy to the Chatan and the Kala. And the very last bracha says, the one right immediately after, Mesamech Chatan Im HaKala, to bring joy to the Chatan with the Kala. It sounds like the exact same bracha, with the Kala and the Kala. What's the difference? So if you look in Parshat Balak, you'll see that Balak hires a man named Bilam to go curse the Jewish people. And Bilam says, look, I can only do what God tells me. Remember, he's not Jewish. He was on the level of Nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu almost. But he says, I can only do what God tells me. He says, okay, fine, talk to your God, let us know what happens. Comes the next morning, God told me, I can't go. So no, they sent more messengers and okay, we'll give you all the gold and silver and the Starbucks gift card, everything we're going to give to you. And they said, look, I told you I can only do what God says. So he turns back to God. God says, if these people have come to call you to go with, go ahead. You can go with them. Lechitam. You can go with them. Next pasuk. It says that Bilam got up in the morning and he went with them. And God got angry. He went. Wait a minute. You just said I can go, right? So Hashem tells him, go lechitam. Go with them just means along with them. But what does it say he did? He went im, with an ayin mem. Rashi says, like with the same mindset. He joined up forces to be like with them, to be part of them. That's what this is. No, say the ol im chavero is not just a surface. Let me help you with your bags. Let me help you with you having a problem. It's not that. It means to really get involved somehow, not with carrying the bags necessarily, but to really feel that need, that pain, that desire, that hope. You know, it's not always about pain. Sometimes someone has a dream about something. Someone has the hope and wants to plan something. It means helping someone like that too, because they may be, quote, in difficult times trying to figure out how are they going to bring that dream to realization. Mammon, how about money? To help someone to the best of your abilities, your financial abilities, and to prevent any financial damage to the person. Also to prevent any kind of potential financial harm that could come to somebody, whether it is to an individual or to a community. How do you cause financial problems to community? I don't know. You can steal from a tzedakah box. You can embezzle money, funds from a shul, or all kinds of fun things. Just see me. I have all these ideas. I'm a teacher. I have to make money somehow. Right? I was a rabbi. Yeah, by the way, in a rabbi of a shul, you have what's most shuls, especially in the United States, here too, you have what's called a discretionary fund, right? So it's the rabbi's discretion to get, thousands of bucks into the discretionary fund, like, oh, I guess my kids need shoes. That's to my discretion. Okay. Even if right this moment, the hezek, the potential damage that could occur, is not very common, but because it may happen, he's got to remove that potential problem that could come financially to that person. I'll give you an example. Said, your money should be as beloved, your friend's money should be to you as your own is to yourself. You're walking outside this morning and you see somebody left a book sitting outside and it starts to rain. And your two thoughts could be either, poor slob, book's going to get ruined, right? Or, oh yeah, I'm sorry, this guy's book's going to get ruined. Take it, bring it, put it inside one of the buildings or something. Just leave a note, send a note to the person, something. You got to protect the other. What do you mean it's not your property? Who cares? How dare you not want to protect somebody else's property, right? So to what extent are you required to protect another person? Depends. In other words, you have to jump in front of someone to literally take a bullet for them, God forbid. Again, that's, imagine the guy said, wait, I got to ask a shot from my rabbi. Listen, do I have to take a bullet for this guy or not? Well, but you understand what I'm saying, I hope. The nefesh, let me read this one, and then we'll stop at this topic. Nefesh, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, you should try to help the other person in any way spiritually possible, whether it has to do with the person's honor, respect, or any other area of life. Anything you know, that if you do it for your friend, he'll be built up. He'll have nachas from this. Mitzvat chasidutu la'asoto. Do you know the difference between seeing someone in the morning, smiling at them, saying good morning, and not even saying good morning, and not a smile, nothing, just walking right by somebody? It's gigantic, gigantic. Just a smile, not morning. I have my coffee. Don't talk to me. Come back to me at 11. Okay? No, and even if you're in a lousy mood, it helps you. Smile. Be nice to the person. Obviously, for sure, you should never try to cause anyone any kind of pain. Yeah, but is open in any respect, any way whatsoever. This is also falls into the general category of chasadim, chesed, that Chachamim have praised. It includes trying to make peace between people, which is the general benefit for all people between Adam ben Adam lechavero, man and his fellow man. Very last Mishnah, I'm Bezrat Hashem finishing Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, Nishmat, somebody that I was learning for. Probably the next couple of weeks. I finished. I said I don't want to do this. I'm doing it at school. The very, very, very last Mishnah talks about and says, "Lo matzah kadosh baruch hu kli machazik bracha ela hashalom." The only utensil Hashem ever found to really truly hold bracha, or blessing, is peace. That what brings us blessing is bringing shalom into the world. Every single time we mention shalom, it's the last thing. The end of Shemona Esrei, the end of Birkat Hamazon, the end of Kaddish, the end of Kiddush, everything. It's always the last thing because you can have all the other good stuff. But if you don't have shalom, you don't have peace, sense of peace and tranquility and connection, it's not necessarily all worthwhile. It's problematic. Okay. We're going to move to I'm going to shift a little bit for a moment. Close your book. And I want to tell you briefly of how we are what topic we're going to talk about. For those who are on Zoom, it may cut out, and when it does, I'll restart the whole thing because this one's the only one I do that's just a 40-minute predetermined time. So if you do get knocked out, just come back on Zoom a minute later. We said we're learning today Lilu Nishmat Michael ben Avraham, whose yard sites this Shabbat. Bezrat Hashem. Hannah mentioned to me that she wanted to do something for the yard site, and we said, okay, maybe we'll dedicate the shiur. And I can also bring up a special topic that may have been something important in his life and Mike's life. I said, give me a topic that was important to him. And that was achnasat orchim, bringing in guests to the home. And I said, it's unbelievable because his yard site will always be the week of Parshat Vayera, which is this week, which is where we learned the very beginning about the mitzvah of achnasat orchim, which is an amazing thing. So what I want to do, we'll call it here on the screen. Just a minute. That's why I have to change my glasses, otherwise I'll not be able to see. There we go. There's the screen. Okay, come on. How do we know about Achnasat Orchim from the beginning? This Bikur Cholim. Sorry, that's Bikur Cholim. Achnasat Orchim is the beginning where Hashem visits Abraham. Achnasat the Bikur Cholim, because he had just had his brit. And the next thing, when Abraham brings the guests into his home, is where we learn the idea of Achnasat Orchim. So I want to share with you a few things about Achnasat Orchim. There's an expression that says, Gdolah Achnasat Orchim yoter mikablat pnei hashchina, that the idea of taking a guest into your home is even greater than receiving the Shekhinah, the divine presence itself. And we learned it from Avraham Avinu, this week's parasha, where what's happening? If you just read the words and listen to the translation, you miss this. Hashem is visiting Avraham, as it were, in his tent. And then Avraham Vayar, he says, Vayisai na Vayar, and Avraham lifts his eyes up and he sees 3 men walking by. And he runs out to greet them and says, Adonai, imna matzati chen beinecha al na tavor me'alavdecha. Now, the word Ado and Nai, Aleph, Dalad, Nun, Yud, Rashi says could be either Hashem he's talking to, or the visitors who are walking by. Well, wait a minute. If he's talking to Hashem, he already ran away. He's already outside the tent. God, I'll be right back. That's what he should say. Then leave and go to run to, but he's already out there. So 2 things we get from that. Number 1, Abraham's entire being was so attuned and wired to doing mitzvot of Hashem, what Hashem wanted, that even was he with the Hashem, Kiviyachol, the Shekhinah, the most concentrated part of the divine presence, he still ran out on that just to do Hashem's will. And on the other hand, it also teaches the idea that it is greater to the mitzvah Achnasat Orchim, even more than trying to commune, so to speak, with Shekhinah, the divine presence. And we get that from Avraham Avinu. I'm going to read you a brief story. It's in Hebrew. I'll translate as I read it. And keep this on top. And then tell you a couple ideas, halachot, which will come as a little bit of a surprise. Because a lot of things that we do that we think is hachnasat orchim is not, and things that we don't do turns out to be hachnasat orchim or don't think, whatever, right? You know what I mean. Figure it out. I talk in tongues. And I had coffee early today, 5:30 this morning. They tell the following story about the father of the Baal Shem Tov, who was the father of Hasidut. You see the connection? His name was Rabbi Eliezer. He was very much into the mitzvah of achnasat orchim. Right now, we'll just kind of translate that as, bringing guests into your home, getting food, clothing, sleep. What did he do? He paid somebody actually to sit at the edge of the village. So when he would see any poor people go by the edge of the village, he'd tell them to invite them and bring them to his home, into the home of Rabbi Eliezer. And he would give them food and drink, like the shefa, give them a lot. In heaven, there was this great joy. There was one close the door. There was a great joy in heaven to the actions of Rabbi Eliezer. The Satan came along and he was a little bit against this whole thing. He says, you know what? I really want to see, is he doing this l'shem shamayim? Is he really doing this for the right reason? There's a need to test this. And he decided to test him. Hashem says, fine, I'm going to let you test him, but you're not going to be able to test him. It's going to come through Eliyahu Hanavi. One Shabbat afternoon, on Shabbat in the afternoon, there was a wandering guy who came by the house of Rabbi Eliezer. He had his backpack on, and he had his stick, a walking stick. Michalel Shabbat Gamur. Absolutely not a religious person, as we say in English, Mechal Shabbos. And in order for Rabbi Eliezer to be aware that this person who came to his door knew full well it was Shabbat, he gave a big Shabbos. Rabbi Eliezer did not want to embarrass this poor man. He pretended he didn't see this guy was a Mechal Shabbos. He invited him to come and eat. He gave him everything. He gave the best of everything. Also, the next day when they separated on Sunday, he didn't say anything. Well, it's good to have you. Have a nice life. Even it added, from now on, next time you're in town, please stop by. At that moment, Eliyahu Hanavi appeared before Rabbi Eliezer. And he gave him the following news: that he would have a child in his old age, who would enlighten the Jewish people, and that became the Baal Shem Tov. That was the baby that was born as a result. Now, this story, absolutely beautiful story, makes it us to believe and understand, rightfully so, Hachnasat Orchim is tremendously important. Not only that, it's not only Gdolah Hachnasat Orchim, Yotem Kabbalat Pinei Shechina. Not only is it greater than being with the Shechina, but it's even when it drives the Shechina away. What does that mean? Here you have a person who's Mechal Shabbos. He doesn't keep Shabbos. He's not religious. He's not doing anything. Or you have a person who comes to your table. They sit and they talk some Lashon Hara, or they're talking stuff on Shabbat you don't talk about business. That's not what the Shekhinah wants. That's not what Hashem wants. Still, you got the mitzvah of Hachnasat Orchim. Even though what he's doing is maybe driving the Shekhinah a little bit away, it's still a tremendous mitzvah. Which leads us to think that, wait a minute, That's pretty cool. That means that every time I bring someone into my home, I get a tremendous mitzvah achnasat orchim. You might think that, and you'd be wrong, according to most opinions. Let me explain. I'm going to say, I'm going to start off by saying something that's going to sound controversial, not controversial, it's not me, controversial. And then I'm going to mitigate that, mollify it with what really is the actual practice and what we do nowadays. Okay. This comes from Rav Malaban, Pnimei Halacha. It says as follows. When you invite people for Shabbat meal to your house, not because they're poor, your neighbors, someone in the community you want to invite, it does not come to the true level of Achnasat Orchim. Hold on. Say a couple of like, what? It's not the level of Achnasat Orchim the Chachamim praised. Why? They have a place they can stay home, they can eat there. The basic concept of Achnasat Orchim would be, it seems, is when you're feeding someone who doesn't have what to eat, or you're housing someone who doesn't have a place to stay. Furthermore, it appears from this, even if someone's in the community, they came from Modi'in for Shabbat, still not necessarily to the level of Achnasat Orchim of a poor person. If they could have stayed in a hotel, well, unless you're staying in D City's little hotel, which they lost Hashgacha, I think, by their request. Yeah, I didn't know they had any food service even. Yeah, recently. It does not reach the level, again, of the true Achnasat Orchim, the Chazal talk about. Chazal Chachamenu Zichronam Livracha, rabbis of blessed men. Obviously, there's still a value, and it's important what you're doing. Nevertheless, when it says it doesn't necessarily apply to that situation. Why? Because they have other places they could have been, meaning their own home. This is actually said in the Shulchan Aruch. It's not just Dinei Halacha mentioned, this is the Shulchan Aruch mentions this. Even though it may not be the full sense of the word Achnasat Orchim. You can't say, well, I'll just open a can of tuna. If it's not really Achnasat Orchim, let them bring their own stupid food. I'll just put a plastic tablecloth and we'll sit on the floor and eat. Doesn't work that way. What do you do when you greet someone, you bring someone? That's a tremendous other mitzvah. You do to someone, you help someone, you bring more joy and shalom into this world. Give me 1 second. I'm going to stop the Zoom and restart it. So those of you who are on Zoom, you come back on in a moment, please.